Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a nice idea if everyone can leave a comment and let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. A few months ago, I started hearing noises coming from under my floorboards. At first, it was just the occasional creak or rustle, nothing too alarming. I live alone in a small house, and it's an old building, so I assumed it was just the usual sounds of an aging structure settling or maybe some small animals like mice. I didn't think much of it. As the days went by, the noises became more frequent and pronounced. I would hear distinct shuffling sounds, especially at night. Sometimes it sounded like something was scraping against the wood. It was unsettling, but I kept telling myself it was just my imagination or perhaps a raccoon or possum that had found its way under the house. I even considered calling pest control but decided to wait a bit longer to see if the noises would stop on their own. One evening, as I was watching TV, I heard a noise that was unmistakably human, a cough. My heart started racing. I muted the television and listened intently. There it was again, a faint cough followed by a shuffling sound. It was coming from directly beneath me. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was no animal. Someone was under my house. Trying to stay calm, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I whispered to the operator about the noises and the cough I just heard. They assured me that an officer would be dispatched immediately. While waiting, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. How long had this person been there? What were their intentions? The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers approached my door, and I quickly let them in, explaining the situation in hushed tones. They decided to investigate the crawl space beneath the house. One officer stayed with me while the other went outside to access the hatch that led under the building. Sky News. Moments later, the officer outside called out, confirming that there were signs of someone living under the house. He had found a makeshift bed made of old blankets and some personal belongings. My stomach turned. The realization that someone had been living just beneath me was horrifying. The officers decided to call for backup, including a K-9 unit, to ensure they could safely apprehend the individual. While waiting, they advised me to stay inside and lock all doors and windows. I sat in my living room, every creak of the house making me jump. The minutes felt like hours. When the additional units arrived, they surrounded the house and commanded the person to come out. There was no response. After several warnings, they sent the dog into the crawl space. I could hear the muffled sounds of the K-9 barking and the officers shouting commands. Eventually, they managed to extract a man from beneath my house. He was disheveled, his clothes tattered and dirty. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, with a gaunt face and hollow eyes. The officers handcuffed him and placed him in the back of a patrol car. One of them came over to reassure me, explaining that the man was homeless and had likely been seeking shelter. They found evidence that he had been sneaking into my house at night to take food from the kitchen. Newsweek. The thought of this stranger moving around my home while I slept was deeply unsettling. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed any signs, no missing food, no out-of-place items. The officer explained that individuals in such situations often go to great lengths to avoid detection, taking only small amounts to avoid raising suspicion. After the police left, I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. I couldn't shake the image of that man living beneath me, listening to my every move, waiting for the right moment to come up into my home. I immediately called a contractor to inspect the crawl space and secure all possible entry points. They installed new locks and reinforced the hatch to ensure no one could access it again. House beautiful. In the days that followed, I found it difficult to sleep. Every noise, no matter how small, set my heart racing. I kept imagining footsteps beneath me, the creak of the floorboards signaling an unseen presence. It took weeks before I could begin to feel safe in my own home again. Reflecting on the experience, I realized how vulnerable I had been. I had ignored the signs, dismissing them as trivial. I learned the importance of trusting my instincts and taking action when something feels off. I also developed a deeper sense of empathy for those who find themselves homeless, driven to desperate measures to find shelter. While I couldn't condone his actions, I understood the dire circumstances that might lead someone to such extremes. Now, I make it a point to regularly inspect my property, ensuring that all entry points are secure. I've also gotten to know my neighbors better, establishing a sense of community and mutual watchfulness. The experience was harrowing, but it taught me valuable lessons about awareness, security, and compassion. A few months ago, something happened that I still can't fully explain. I live alone in a small house on a quiet street. One afternoon, I found a package on my doorstep. It was a plain, brown cardboard box with no markings except for a shipping label. The label had my address but a name I didn't recognize. Thinking it was a simple delivery mistake, I planned to call the delivery company later to sort it out. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to open the package to see if there was any information inside that could help me return it to its rightful owner. Inside, I found a stack of photographs. As I flipped through them, my stomach tightened. They were all pictures of me. Some were taken during the day, others at night. In some, I was watching TV in my living room. In others, I was asleep in my bed. The angles suggested they were taken through my windows. I felt exposed and violated. I immediately called the police. An officer arrived shortly after, and I showed him the photos and the package. He took my statement and the items as evidence. He said they would investigate and advised me to keep my doors and windows locked and to report any further incidents. Despite his calm demeanor, I could tell he was concerned. That night, sleep eluded me. Every creak of the house made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next day, I installed new locks on all doors and windows and bought heavy curtains to block any views inside. I also set up motion sensor lights around the property. I hoped these measures would deter whoever was watching me. Days passed without incident, and I began to relax, thinking it might have been a one-time occurrence. Then, about a week later, another package arrived. Identical to the first, it had my address but a different, unfamiliar name. Dread settled over me as I opened it. More photos. These were taken from different angles, some from higher vantage points, suggesting the person had climbed trees or used a ladder. One photo stood out. It was a close-up of me sitting on my bed, reading. The detail was chilling. It was as if the photographer had been in the room with me. Panicked, I called the police again. They sent the same officer, who examined the new photos. He asked if I had noticed anyone suspicious or any unfamiliar vehicles in the area. I hadn't. He promised to increase patrols in my neighborhood and suggested I consider installing security cameras. Feeling trapped in my own home, I took his advice and installed cameras covering every angle of my property. I also informed my neighbors about the situation, asking them to be vigilant. Despite these precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I started avoiding windows and kept the curtains drawn at all times. One evening, while reviewing the security footage, I noticed a figure lurking near the edge of my property. The person was dressed in dark clothing and seemed to be holding something. They stayed for a few minutes before disappearing into the shadows. I froze the frame and enhanced the image. Though grainy, it looked like they were holding a camera. Heart pounding, I called the police once more and showed them the footage. The officer took a copy and assured me they would do everything possible to find the person responsible. Despite their efforts, the packages kept coming, each containing more invasive photos. One included a note, "See you soon." The handwriting was unremarkable, offering no clues. Feeling desperate, I decided to stay with a friend for a while, hoping that being away from the house would provide some relief. While at my friend's place, I received a call from the police. They had apprehended a suspect, a man found loitering near my property with a camera and a package similar to the ones I'd received. He had a prior record of stalking. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by lingering fear. The man had been watching me for weeks, possibly longer. The thought made my skin crawl. After his arrest, the packages stopped. I returned home, but it took a long time to feel safe again. I kept the security measures in place and remained vigilant. The experience left me deeply shaken, but I was grateful to be safe. I learned the importance of trusting my instincts and taking threats seriously. I was home alone that evening, enjoying the quiet after a long day. The neighborhood was calm, and the sun had just set, casting a dim light through the windows. I was reading a book in the living room when I heard faint noises coming from the front door. At first, I dismissed them, thinking it might be the wind or a stray cat. But the sounds persisted, resembling the subtle jingling of keys and the gentle rattle of the door handle. Curiosity mixed with unease compelled me to approach the door quietly. Peering through the peephole, I saw a man standing there. He appeared to be in his late 40s, with an average build, wearing a plain gray shirt and dark pants. His face was calm, almost expressionless, as he methodically tried different keys on my door. A ring of keys hung from his belt, and he selected them one by one, inserting each into the lock and turning gently. My heart began to race. I hadn't called for a locksmith or any maintenance. I double-checked my phone to confirm I hadn't forgotten any appointments or services. Nothing. I decided to confront him through the door, keeping it firmly locked. "Excuse me," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "What are you doing?" The man didn't flinch. He stopped what he was doing and looked directly at the peephole, as if he could see me through it. His eyes were calm, almost too calm. "Just a locksmith here for a job," he replied in a monotone voice. I felt a chill run down my spine. "I didn't call a locksmith," I said firmly. He tilted his head slightly, as if considering his next words. "Got a work order for this address," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. He held it up, but the writing was too small and faded for me to read through the peephole. Something felt incredibly off. I hadn't requested any services, and there was no reason for a locksmith to be at my door unannounced. I decided to call the police. Stepping away from the door, I grabbed my phone and dialed emergency services, explaining the situation in a hushed voice. The dispatcher assured me that an officer would be dispatched immediately. Returning to the door, I noticed a man was still there, now trying a different set of keys. "I've called the police," I announced loudly. "They'll be here any minute." The man paused, his hand resting on the door handle. He sighed softly, almost as if he were disappointed, then turned and walked away without another word. I watched through the window as he strolled down the driveway and disappeared into the night. Minutes later, a police car arrived. I explained everything to the officer, who took down the details and assured me they would patrol the area throughout the night. They advised me to be cautious and to call immediately if the man returned. That night, sleep eluded me. Every creak and groan of the house made me jump. I couldn't shake the image of the man's calm demeanor and the way he had methodically tried to unlock my door. The following day, I had a reputable locksmith change all the locks and install additional security measures. I also informed my neighbors about the incident, urging them to be vigilant. Days turned into weeks, and there were no further incidents. But the experience left me shaken, a constant reminder of how quickly one's sense of security can be shattered. It happened last year in December. I was 17, still living at home with my parents. They had gone out of town for a few days to help my aunt after her surgery, and I stayed behind because of school and work. It wasn't the first time I'd been home alone, but it was the first time it scared me. I had an old phone, so my parents got me a new one as an early Christmas gift. Nothing fancy, just a newer model with better battery and space. It came with a bunch of pre-installed apps, and one of them was this health tracker thing. I didn't use it, never even opened it. I didn't care about step counts or heart rates. The first night alone, I stayed up late playing games in my room. The house was quiet, lights were off except in my room. Around 2:30 a.m., I got a pop-up notification. I thought it was from Discord or something, but it was from that fitness app. It said, "Workout started, indoor walk, 1 step." I stared at it, confused. I never turned it on. I didn't even give it permissions. I opened the app for the first time just to see what it meant. It showed a little map layout. Just basic lines. And a dot, like a GPS tracker. The steps were going up, 2, then 4, then 7. The dot was moving slowly. I thought maybe it had glitched and started tracking me by accident. But I was lying in bed. I hadn't moved. I sat still and watched it. The dot moved in a straight line, then paused. 10 steps. 10 more, down the virtual hallway. The layout it showed, it looked exactly like my house. Not some generic shape. It had the same turns, same number of rooms, same length between points. The dot was moving from the kitchen toward the hallway outside my room. I froze. I turned off the screen and listened. My room was upstairs. The hallway creaked when someone walked on it, always had. But there was no sound. I got up slowly, opened my door a crack, and looked out. Nothing. Dark, quiet. I went back in, locked the door, and opened the app again. The dot was still there. Right outside my room. 24 steps. I stared at it. I didn't know what to do. It just sat there. 4 minutes. Then it disappeared. The app said, "Workout ended." No other info. I shut the app and left my light on the rest of the night. I barely slept. Next morning, I checked the whole house. Nothing out of place. Doors still locked. Windows too. I figured maybe it picked up someone walking outside or a neighbor or something. I tried to forget it. That night I made sure everything was locked again. I even slid a chair under the doorknob in my room. I didn't have school the next day, so I stayed up late watching videos. Around 1:10 a.m., another notification popped up. Workout started, indoor walk, 1 step. I opened the app. Same thing. Dot moving again. It started in the basement. I hadn't even gone down there. We had a finished basement with a couch and TV and storage stuff. I watched the dot take 5 steps, then stop. Waited. Then more. Toward the stairs. I muted everything and listened hard. Still nothing. I texted my dad. He didn't answer. I called. No pickup. I didn't want to call the cops yet, in case it was nothing. But my hands were shaking. The dot went up the stairs. Paused at the top. Then it moved again, past the kitchen, toward the living room. Then the hallway again. It reached the outside of my room. 32 steps. I grabbed a baseball bat from under my bed and just stood there, not making a sound. Then the dot moved past my room. 40 steps. Then back. Stopped again outside my door. The screen said workout paused. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. Still paused. I finally called 911. Tried to stay calm. Told them I thought someone was in the house. I stayed on the line with the operator. She told me to stay in the room. Cops were coming. The app still said paused. Then suddenly workout resumed. Dot moved fast. 46. 48. 50. It went down the stairs again. I heard the door to the basement creak open. That was real. That was not the app. I dropped the phone and backed into the corner. The operator asked if I was okay. I said someone just opened the basement door. She said help was almost there. I didn't hear the door shut. I didn't hear anything else. Then I heard sirens. When the police knocked, I didn't open the door until they confirmed it was them. They searched the house. Didn't find anyone. But the back basement window had been forced open. It was small, just big enough for someone to squeeze through. Dirt on the floor where the carpet ended. A shoe print. They said it looked like whoever it was had been using it as an entrance for a while. The lock on the inside was broken. They didn't catch anyone. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was moved. It was like someone just came inside and walked around. Quietly. In the dark. I showed them the app, and one of the officers said it might have picked up a Bluetooth device. Maybe the intruder had a phone too and somehow the signals crossed. But it tracked everything. Exact steps, direction, pauses. The officer said it could have been worse. That they patrol more around the neighborhood. My parents came back the next morning. They replaced the basement window and added bars. We got security cameras and a better alarm system. I deleted the app. I switched phones. But for weeks after that, even with all the new stuff, I'd still wake up at night and check the hallway. Every noise felt louder. Every creak meant someone was coming. Sometimes I still feel like something's moving when I'm alone. I don't trust apps anymore. I keep tape over all the cameras. I keep my door locked even when everyone's home. No one ever figured out who it was. But someone was in the house. And they didn't take anything. They just walked around. It happened in the spring. I live alone in a one-story house outside the main part of town. I bought it 3 years ago after saving up. It's not fancy, just quiet, which I liked. The neighbors are older, keep to themselves, and most days it's peaceful out here. That morning I had just made coffee when I heard a knock. Not a loud one, just 3 knocks, spaced out. I looked through the small window in the front door and saw a man standing on the porch. He was wearing a blue shirt with a patch on the front. He had a lanyard with some sort of badge. I didn't open the door. I just spoke through it. He said he was from the county water board. He said they were doing surprise pressure checks in the neighborhood, that there had been complaints about water lines not being up to code. He said I had to let him in so he could check the valves under the kitchen sink and in the laundry room. I told him I hadn't heard anything about that. He said notices were sent out, but a lot of people don't check the mail lately. The whole time, he never smiled. He just stood there, real still. No clipboard, no bag of tools. Just a small black flashlight in one hand. I asked for identification. He lifted the lanyard toward the glass. It looked like an ID, but I couldn't read it through the glare. I asked him to hold it closer. He did, but only for a second, then dropped it back down. I said I wasn't comfortable letting anyone in without confirming it first. He didn't argue. He just looked at me for a few seconds. Then he said, "You're going to want to let me in. It's required." His voice changed when he said it. Not louder, but harder. Like he was done pretending. I said no. He just stared for a second, then turned around and walked down the steps. I stood at the door, watching him. He didn't get into a work truck. He didn't walk down the street. He just turned the corner beside my house, where the gate to the backyard is. That was when I locked the door. Then I locked the back door, too. I stayed in the kitchen with the phone in my hand. I waited to hear something, but nothing happened. After a minute, I went to the front window. He was gone. I opened the curtain wider and checked both sides. No sign of him. I didn't know where he went. I called the non-emergency line for the county. The woman who answered said they didn't have anyone out doing checks. She said even if they did, they'd never send someone without notice, and definitely never to go inside someone's house. She told me to call the police if he came back. I said I would. I thought maybe that was the end of it. Just a scam or something. But a couple hours later, I turned on the faucet in the kitchen and the water came out slow. Just a thin stream. Then it started hissing and stopped. I tried the bathroom. Same thing. I went outside to check the spigot on the side of the house. No water there either. I walked around to the front where the meter is. There's a small concrete box with a lid over it. I opened it and looked inside. The shut-off valve had been twisted, almost all the way closed. Not just that the plastic around it was cracked like someone used something heavy to jam it. The dirt near it was loose, like it had just been dug up. I stood there for a while, looking down into the box, trying to figure out how he could have done it without making any sound. I didn't even know when he did it. The only time I took my eyes off him was when he turned that corner. That was enough. I called the water department again. They sent someone out 2 hours later. The guy who showed up was in a marked truck. Real ID badge. Radio clipped to his vest. He looked at the box and shook his head. Said it was definitely tampered with. Said someone used a wrench or maybe a pipe to force the valve. He fixed it and told me to be careful. Said he'd file a report, but there wasn't much they could do without a name or plate number. I asked if they had any similar calls. He said no, nothing like that. That night I couldn't sleep. I left lights on inside. I checked the locks 3 times. I kept going to the window to make sure no one was outside. Around 1 a.m., I heard something on the side of the house. A soft scraping sound, like metal on metal. I went to the window in the laundry room and turned off the light before pulling the curtain a little. There was someone at the meter again, kneeling over it. I didn't turn on the outside light. I didn't shout. I backed away and called the police. Told them someone was messing with the water line. I stayed on the phone and watched. The person didn't notice me. They stood up and walked toward the street. I tried to see the face. It looked like the same build as the man from earlier. Same clothes, same still way of moving. No rush, even though he'd just been caught. When the police came, he was gone again. They walked around, took my statement, looked at the valve. This time, it was unscrewed halfway. Like he wanted it to seem like a mistake, or something was wrong with it. They didn't find him. They said they checked nearby homes, maybe get footage from a doorbell cam or something, but no one got back to me. After that night, I had a plumber come out and install a locking cap on the meter. He showed me how to shut it off from inside, just in case. I put cameras outside, one at each corner. I got floodlights, alarm sensors, everything. A few weeks went by with nothing. No sounds, no visits. I started to feel normal again. Then one afternoon I got home from work and there was a folded piece of paper stuck in the edge of the screen door. It said, "Your valve was leaking." I fixed it. You're welcome. No name. No number. Nothing else. I gave it to the police. They told me to call if I saw anything again. It's been 6 months. No more notes. No more people showing up. But every night I still check the meter box before bed. I still check the locks on every door, every window. And sometimes I dream about someone standing at the front door, holding an ID card, asking to be let in. I started renting out the guest room on the far end of the house about 2 years ago. Only when we were gone. My wife didn't like the idea at first, but we needed the money. It had its own entrance, small bathroom, and I changed the locks on the main hallway door, so nobody could come into the rest of the house. I only listed it when we went out of town or visited her sister for long weekends. The place filled fast. I always checked profiles, never took bookings with no picture or new accounts. Never had a problem. The last one happened in September. We were going to a wedding out in Maine, 5 days total. I listed the room 3 weeks early and got a request from someone named Travis. He looked about late 20s in the photo, clean. Said he was traveling for a job interview and only needed the space for 3 nights. Seemed polite. We texted a bit through the app, and he booked right away. The day before we left, I prepped a room. Fresh sheets, checked the keypad lock, stocked water and coffee. I didn't think much of it. He showed up the night we drove out. I left the lights on and the key code in the app message. I didn't get any alerts or problems the whole trip. He checked out while we were still away. Left no message, but the system marked him gone. We got home Monday night, tired from the drive. My wife went straight to bed. I did my usual walkthrough. Room looked clean, towels folded. No mess. The only thing I noticed was the smoke detector on the ceiling looked crooked. It hung a little lower on one side. I thought maybe it had come loose. When I got on the chair and popped the cover off to straighten it, I saw something inside that didn't belong. There was a tiny black lens behind the fence slats. A thin wire looped around the battery. Not something you'd see unless you opened it. I stood there for a long time, just holding it. My stomach dropped. At first I thought it was some kind of weird Airbnb prank or test, but the more I looked, the worse it got. It was a small hidden camera, the kind you can buy online. I found a little SD card tucked on the side. I took it out and went straight to my office. I plugged it into the computer. It had files on it. Each clip was about an hour long. Motion activated. It started recording the day after Travis checked in. The first clips were of the room. Him coming in and out. Sleeping. Normal stuff. Then the third file showed him standing in the middle of the room. He looked straight up at the detector. Smiled. Then walked out. The next clip was the same day, but the camera angle was different. It wasn't in the room anymore. It was downstairs, in my living room. It showed my wife, the morning we were packing. She was folding clothes on the couch. In the background, I was loading the car. The camera stayed still. No movement, no zoom. Just watching from the bookshelf. Then it cut off. The next few files were worse. One of them showed the hallway by our bedroom. Another one caught my daughter. She's 8, eating cereal in the kitchen. It wasn't shaky, like someone holding a phone. It looked still, like placed on a shelf or ledge. None of us saw it. He must have walked through the house while we were outside or busy. Maybe even at night. The locks were always on, but I kept a key in the laundry room just in case. I never thought someone would go looking for it. There were clips of my daughter brushing her teeth. One of my wife making dinner. The worst one was from behind the laundry room door, peeking through a crack. It showed my daughter sleeping. Her door was halfway open. There were no clips after we left. Nothing from the last day. I checked the timestamps. He took the camera out of the detector the morning we were driving back. Put it back just enough so it wouldn't look off unless someone looked real close. I took the footage and the camera to the police the next day. They asked if anything had been stolen. I said no. Just watched. They kept the SD card. Asked for the messages between us. I printed everything. They said they'd file a report, maybe open a case if they could match his ID. But nothing happened after that. The account disappeared from the app 2 days later. No profile, no photo. It just said user not found. Airbnb said the person used a prepaid card and an email that didn't trace anywhere. The ID he uploaded wasn't real. The number was fake. The face on it was a match, but the name was different than the one on the app. They offered me a refund for the booking and a safety review, but that didn't matter. I threw out every smoke detector in the house and got new ones. I put locks on the cabinets, new cameras in the common areas. I changed the door locks. Moved the spare key outside to a box with a code. My daughter started sleeping with the light on. I keep thinking about how he got into the house without us knowing. How many rooms he walked through. If he had keys made. If he stayed longer than he said. If he came back after we left and watched again. I don't rent the room anymore. I never will again. I was alone that night. It had rained all day. The power went out sometime after 9. I thought it was just the wind, or maybe the trees hitting the lines behind the house. It's happened before, but never for more than an hour. My phone was at 40%. I lit one candle and stayed in the living room. It was too quiet. No fridge humming. No heater. Just the tapping of rain against the windows. I didn't feel scared at first. More annoyed than anything. I had work the next morning and didn't want to go to bed with no heat or alarm. The house felt smaller with everything off. I sat there with the phone in my hand, checking for signal every few minutes. The bars kept disappearing and coming back. No surface, then one bar, then none again. My flashlight app worked though. I used it to walk to the kitchen and check the fuse box. The fuse box is in the laundry room off the kitchen. I stepped over the pile of laundry I'd left on the floor earlier. I held my phone up and opened the panel. Nothing looked wrong, but I flipped a few switches anyway. Nothing came back on. That's when I heard the floor creak. Not loud, just a soft sound, like a heel pressing down slow. It came from the direction of the hallway. I turned the flashlight toward it and didn't see anything. I figured it was the wood settling, maybe from the temperature change. I've heard that kind of thing before, but something about it felt different this time. When I turned back toward the living room, the light passed over the tile floor, and I saw the prints. They were wet. Bare feet. They started from the kitchen, turned toward the hallway, then stopped near the back door. I stood still and didn't move. The light shook a little in my hand. The rain was still going outside, but the prints weren't fading like they were fresh. I didn't hear the door open. I didn't hear anything until that creak. I followed the prints back toward the kitchen. My feet were dry. I hadn't stepped in water. I hadn't gone outside. No windows open. No leaks. I checked the sink. It was dry. The fridge was still dark, the floor dry around it. But the prints, they were full. Toes, heel, even the arches. Like someone had walked inside straight from rain or mud. I moved slow, light sweeping the floor, then the counter, then the doorway. No one was there. I didn't hear anything. The prints kept going toward the laundry room. I checked the back door. It was locked. Chain still on. But the rug in front of the door was pushed back. Not by much. Just enough to show that it had moved. I felt sick in my stomach. I backed away from the door and turned toward the hallway. If someone had come in, they had to still be inside. The only way out was past me, and I hadn't heard a thing. I checked the front door. Still locked. Bolted. No sign of damage. I went to the bedroom, not to sleep, but to get the only thing I had: pepper spray in the drawer. My hands were cold. I kept the flashlight aimed at the ground. I walked the hallway and opened each door one by one. Bathroom. Closet. Nothing. I opened the guest room last. The one at the end of the hall. I had cleaned it that morning. The bed was still made. But the closet door was open about 2 inches. I always keep it shut. I didn't go near it right away. I stayed by the door and listened. I couldn't hear breathing or shifting, but the smell in the room had changed. Damp, like soil or wet fabric. I walked closer, slow, the light shaking more now. I raised the spray can with my other hand. I opened the door fast and backed away. No one was in there. Not standing, not crouched. Just empty shelves and a box of old shoes. The smell was stronger. I checked behind the curtain, under the bed. Nothing. I stood there a while trying to listen for any other sound. That's when I saw it. A wet handprint on the wall just above the light switch. Just one. Not smeared. Like someone touched the wall as they passed it. The print was low. At shoulder height. It hadn't been there earlier. I locked myself in my room after that. I pushed the dresser in front of the door and stayed sitting on the floor with my back to the wall. I didn't sleep. I kept the light on until my phone died. I kept the spray in my hand. The prints had led back toward the back door, but the door had still been locked. It made no sense. When the sun came up, I got dressed and moved the dresser. The owls looked different in daylight. No more prints on the tile. They'd dry overnight. But the rug near the door was still off-center. I looked around again with the morning light. I found a small scuff mark on the outside of the back door, right near the edge of the frame, like something had pried at it. Later that afternoon, I had someone from the locksmith place come check. He said the door frame had been tampered with. Not broken in the usual way, but enough to make the lock slip if the pressure was right. He replaced the whole thing. I had him change the locks on every door after that. I added cameras too. One in the hallway, one outside above the porch, one in the laundry room facing the door. I kept watching the footage for weeks after, every night. I never saw him. I don't even know if it was a him. But those prints were too big to be a kid's. Too wide. The step length was adult. It never happened again. But I still check the floors every night now. I still keep the spray next to the bed. And I never walk into a dark room without a light. I moved into this place at the start of the year. It was a duplex, upstairs unit. Not a big one, just one bedroom, but it was clean and quiet and not far from work. It had this big tree out front, real close to the building. The landlord said it was fine, had been there for years. I didn't think much about it. The first week I didn't notice anything strange. I was tired from unpacking and settling in. But after that, I started seeing something outside my window at night. It was always at the same time, around 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't keep my blinds open, just a small gap in the corner so air can move through better when the window's cracked. The first night I saw it, I was lying in bed looking at my phone. I saw something move in the corner of my eye. I thought it was just a branch or shadow. I looked again, and for maybe 2 seconds, there was someone outside the window. Just standing there. Their face was level with the glass. Then gone. I sat up fast and went to the window, pulled the blinds open, but there was nothing. No noise. No movement. I told myself it was the dark playing tricks. But it happened again the next night. Same time. Same face. Just a second or two. Then gone again. I stopped sleeping after that. I stayed up with the lights on. I moved to the couch. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. But every night at 1 o'clock, I'd look and he'd be there. Still. Just a few seconds. Then gone. I never saw how he got there. It didn't make sense. I was on the 2nd floor. There was no ledge, no fire escape, nothing to climb from below. I thought maybe I was losing it. I asked my landlord about it. He said no one had keys but him and me, and no one could get up there without a ladder. He laughed it off like I was being dramatic. I even called the police after the 3rd time. They came and looked around. Didn't find anything. No footprints, no signs of someone climbing up. But it kept happening. One night I tried to take a picture. I had my phone ready, waited for the time to come. But by the time I clicked it, there was nothing there. Like he knew I was trying. That's what got to me more than anything. The way he only stayed long enough to be seen, but never long enough to catch. I covered the window with a sheet. Taped it all the way around. I didn't want to see him anymore. But I still stayed awake. Still felt like he was there. still waited for 1 o'clock to come and go. A week later, I woke up to a noise on the roof. Not loud, just soft thumps. Like someone walking slow. My heart started beating real fast. I stayed in bed and didn't move. The noise stopped after a few steps. I didn't sleep again that night. Next morning, I went outside and looked at the tree. It had thick branches that stretched right up to the roof. I never thought much about it before. I never thought someone would actually climb it. I called my brother. Told him everything. He said he'd come by and help me put cameras up. We went to the hardware store, got 2 cheap motion ones and set them up. One on the tree pointing at the window, the other on the side of the house. That night, I waited. I stayed in the dark, sitting on the floor near the bed with the camera app open. When 1 o'clock came, nothing happened. No face. No sound. I thought maybe he knew again. I felt watched even though I couldn't see him. Next morning, I checked the footage. The tree cam caught it. Just after 12:50, a man climbed up. Slow, careful. He was barefoot. He held onto the trunk with one hand and used the branches like stairs. When he got to the top, he crouched for a bit. Then he stood right in front of the window. He didn't touch it. Didn't knock. Just stood there. Face right up close. Then he turned and climbed back down the way he came. I called the police again and showed them the video. They took it more serious that time. They searched the area and found footprints by the base of the tree. They said they'd patrol the block more often, but unless they caught him doing it, they couldn't do much else. I stayed at my brother's place for a while after that. I couldn't sleep in my own bed knowing he might come back. My brother helped me trim the tree so the branches wouldn't reach the roof anymore. We cut them far back. There was no way up now without a ladder. After a few days, I went home again. I didn't sleep well, but nothing happened that night. Or the next. Almost a week went by without anything strange. I thought maybe it was over. Then one morning I woke up and found something outside the window. A small folded note wedged between the screen and the frame. It just said, "You changed the tree." That was all. No name. No date. Just that. I called the police again. They said they'd file it, but it wasn't enough to arrest anyone. I bought more cameras. Put one facing the yard. One behind the house. I got alarms for the windows too. Slept with the lights on again. He never came back after that. At least not that I saw. But I still check the cameras every morning. Still check the window before I sleep. I don't open it anymore, not even in summer. And I never forget the way he stood there without blinking. Like he knew I'd be looking. Like he wanted me to. I never thought much about my routine. I live alone, work from home, and honestly, I enjoy the quiet. It wasn't much of a change when I moved to this house, just a small 2-bedroom place with a backyard. Nothing fancy, but it suited me well enough. I'd lived there for a few months without incident. That is, until last week. I woke up one morning to get ready for work, as usual. The house was still dark, and the only noise was the hum of the fridge and the soft tick of the clock on the wall. I made my coffee, got dressed, and went to the kitchen. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Until I opened the fridge. There was a sticky note on the door. Just a small yellow square of paper. At first, I thought it might have been from the night before, maybe something I wrote down and forgot about. But the writing wasn't mine. It was neat, careful. No smudges. It read, "Don't forget to lock the back door." I froze. I live alone. No one comes over. I don't have friends who drop by unannounced. I made sure of that when I first moved in. I kept the back door locked every night, and I always double-checked it before bed. I don't remember ever leaving it unlocked. I would have noticed. I stared at the note for a while. Maybe it was some kind of joke, but it didn't feel like one. The handwriting was clean and precise, someone who took their time writing it, and that was enough to make me uneasy. I checked the back door right away, just in case. Locked. Deadbolt in place. I tried to shake it off, but the unease stuck with me throughout the day. I kept thinking about that note. Who would have left it? How did they know the back door was even unlocked? I didn't have any guests. No one had been inside my house since I'd moved in. I didn't even get deliveries that often. I told myself I was overthinking it. It was probably just something I missed, or some odd mistake. So, I went about my day, but the feeling didn't leave. That night, I made a point of checking all the locks before bed, front door, back door, windows. I made sure everything was secure. I even turned the deadbolt on the back door just to be sure. I didn't go to sleep right away. I kept thinking about the note, trying to figure out how someone could have gotten into my house. I didn't hear anything during the night, and nothing seemed out of place in the morning when I woke up. But then I saw it again, the sticky note. This time, it wasn't on the fridge. It was on the counter, right in the middle of the kitchen, like it had been placed there on purpose. I picked it up slowly. It was the same note as the day before, "Don't forget to lock the back door." This time, I felt my heart race. There was no way I could have missed it. I locked the back door every night without fail. It was a habit by now, and I was sure I'd locked it the night before. I walked over to the back door again. I checked it. It was still locked, deadbolt secure. I looked out the window, but there was nothing unusual outside. No sign of anyone being nearby. I didn't know what to think. The notes made no sense. Who could be doing this? And how were they getting into my house? The next day, I decided to leave work a little early. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside. I knew the locks were fine, but what if they were finding a way around them? I checked the back door again. Locked. Still secure. I didn't know what else to do. So, I stayed in for the rest of the evening, not wanting to leave in case someone decided to show up again. Around 9 p.m., I got an email. It was from my work, just a generic update, nothing out of the ordinary. I was about to close it when I heard a soft thud from the back of the house. It was faint, like someone tapping against the wall. It wasn't loud enough to be alarming, but it was enough to make me jump. I stood still, listening, but the sound didn't come again. I waited a while, just in case, but there was nothing. I decided to check the back door one more time. Locked. Just as I expected. I went to bed that night with a deep sense of unease. I told myself that everything was fine, that I was just overreacting. But I didn't sleep well. Every little sound made me tense up, and I kept thinking about that note. I wasn't sure if I was paranoid, or if someone was really inside my house. The next morning, I found another note. This time, it was on the bathroom mirror. Lock the back door. I didn't know what to think anymore. Whoever was leaving these notes had been inside my house more than once, and I had no idea how. I hadn't heard anything, I hadn't seen anything, but there was clear evidence someone had been here. I immediately checked the back door. Locked. Deadbolt engaged. I checked the windows, the kitchen, the living room. Nothing seemed disturbed. Everything was just as I'd left it. I called a locksmith that afternoon, just to be sure. I wanted to make sure the locks were all still secure. I even had them check the deadbolts in all the windows, just to be safe. Nothing was wrong. The locks were fine. There was no way for anyone to get in unless they had a key. And I hadn't given anyone keys. I spent the rest of the night with all the lights on, locking everything I could. I even checked the back door one last time before bed, even though I knew it was locked. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The notes didn't stop. Every night, I'd find one somewhere in the house. The fridge, the counter, the bathroom mirror, even once on my pillow. Every time, it was the same message: lock the back door. I still don't know who it was. I checked the house again and again. No one had broken in, and nothing had been tampered with. But those notes kept appearing. Whoever was leaving them knew exactly what they were doing. They knew my routine, knew when I'd be home, and they knew my fear. I haven't found another note since. It's been a week, and for the first time, I'm starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, it's over. But every time I come home, I check the back door first thing. I check the locks. And I wonder if I'm just waiting for the next note to show up. Every time I open the fridge, I think about that first sticky note. And I still can't figure out who was in my house or how they got in. I've always been the type of person who values my privacy. I work from home, so my routine is predictable and my space is mine. I spend most of my time in my office upstairs, a small room with a desk, a computer, and bookshelves lined with my favorite novels. I don't have many visitors, and I like it that way. My friends know to text me before stopping by, and I rarely go out unless I have to. I wasn't used to anyone coming into my house uninvited, so when something strange happened, it left me completely unsettled. It started on Wednesday, around 2 p.m. I had been working in my office all morning, with my headphones on, completely absorbed in my tasks. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet I've always appreciated. I don't even remember when the last time I heard any noises from outside was. Maybe the wind rustling the trees or the sound of a car passing by, but that was it. Everything felt normal, just as it always had. I lost track of time, as I often do when I'm in the zone. By the time I looked at the clock again, I realized it was almost 4 p.m., and I hadn't moved in hours. I stood up, stretched my legs, and decided to take a break. I went downstairs to grab a coffee. The moment I stepped off the last stair, I froze. The front door was wide open. I immediately felt a chill run down my spine. I stood there for a second, trying to figure out if I had left it open by accident. I was sure I'd locked it that morning. My mind raced. I walked over to the door, stood in the doorway, and looked out. Nothing seemed unusual at first. The neighborhood was quiet, as always, with only the distant hum of traffic from a few streets away. I stepped out onto the porch, glanced around, but saw no one. Still, something felt off. A strange sense of unease settled in my chest. I looked back inside the house, and that's when I noticed the muddy footprints. They were all over the floor, leading from the entryway and toward the living room. There was no mistaking it, someone had been inside my house. The prints were fresh, their dark, muddy smudges stark against the hardwood floor. My heart began to race, and I quickly stepped back inside, closing the door behind me, as if doing that might somehow keep whatever had happened outside. I had locked the door, hadn't I? I was sure I had. But there it was, wide open, as though someone had walked right in. I turned around and looked at the rest of the house. No lights were on. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but the feeling of something being off, something being wrong, gnawed at me. I walked cautiously into the living room, following the trail of muddy footprints. The carpet in the living room was untouched, but I could see a few more prints leading toward the kitchen. I checked the rest of the house, my mind racing, trying to find something that was missing, something that would explain what had happened. But nothing was gone. My wallet was still on the kitchen counter. My keys were in the bowl by the door. Nothing had been disturbed except for the muddy footprints. Nothing was missing. No drawers had been opened, no cabinets rifled through. I walked through every room, checking and double-checking for anything out of place, but it all seemed untouched. Whoever had come in hadn't taken anything. But they had been there. I could feel it. I could feel their presence lingering in the house. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood still in the living room, looking around. I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I had been home the entire time, working upstairs. I didn't hear anyone come in, I didn't hear the door open, and I didn't hear anyone walking around. I hadn't seen or heard a thing. How had they gotten in? How had I not noticed? I walked back to the front door, trying to piece it together. I checked the lock, it was still in place, just as it had been when I left it. No sign of forced entry. No broken windows, no tampered locks, nothing. It was as if the person had simply opened the door and walked in. I stood there, staring at the door for a long time, my mind racing with possibilities. Was it someone who knew me? Someone who had a key? But I had no one close enough to even consider that. I didn't have a boyfriend, a roommate, or anyone I'd trust with a spare key. I had never had issues with safety before. I didn't know where to start looking for answers. I stood there in my doorway for what felt like an eternity, feeling vulnerable, exposed, and unsure of what to do next. My first instinct was to call the police, but I wasn't sure what they would be able to do. There was no sign of a break-in. There was no way to prove anything had been stolen, no way to know if this person had intended to steal anything. I didn't even have any idea who they were or why they'd come into my house in the first place. After a few minutes, I grabbed my phone and called my friend Sam. She'd known me since college, and I trusted her to help me think this through. I told her what happened, my voice shaky. I found muddy footprints in my house, I said. The door was open, and I don't know who came in or how they got in. Nothing's missing, but I feel like someone was here. Sam's voice came through the phone, calm but concerned. Call the police. They need to know about this. Even if nothing's gone, it's still a break-in. You don't know if they're still inside, or if they'll come back. It made sense. The fact that nothing was taken didn't mean it wasn't serious. I wasn't sure if I was scared of the intrusion or more of the unknown who had done this, and what were they looking for? I had no answers. The police, on the other hand, might at least offer some. I hung up with Sam and dialed the police. The dispatcher was polite, but her voice did nothing to ease the cold dread that had settled deep in my stomach. I tried to explain what had happened as clearly as I could, but the entire time I was talking, I couldn't stop thinking about the footprints, the door, the feeling of someone being in my space. By the time the police arrived, I was feeling more unsettled than ever. The officers were thorough. They checked the door, the locks, and even the surrounding area. But there were no signs of forced entry. They took the footprints seriously, though, and they took pictures of the scene. Still, they didn't have much to go on. We'll make a report, one of the officers said, but without anything missing, it's hard to say what this person wanted. We'll keep an eye on things, but be sure to lock all your doors and windows. And call us if anything else happens. I didn't feel any safer, but I nodded. The officers left, and I locked every door in the house before heading back upstairs to my office. I couldn't concentrate on work. My thoughts kept circling back to the same question: who had been in my house? What were they after? I don't know if I'll ever get answers. I haven't found anything unusual since, but I still check the locks every night before bed. And when I hear any little noise, I freeze, waiting for something to happen. I know someone was inside my house that day. I don't know who they were or what they were after, but I know one thing for sure: I'll never feel the same about my home again. It's strange how easy it is to get used to someone being around, even when you don't see them much. My old roommate, Ben, and I had lived together for over a year, and while we weren't the best of friends, we coexisted just fine. He worked a lot, mostly night shifts, and I worked during the day, so we rarely saw each other. The apartment was small, but we made it work. Ben moved out about a month ago. I didn't think much of it at first. He had his own reasons, and the move was a bit sudden, but I didn't mind. He told me a few times that he was getting a better offer somewhere else. I helped him pack up, gave him a hand with his truck, and then he was gone. I remember feeling relieved. We weren't exactly friends, but I was happy to have the place to myself again. A week or two after he left, I started hearing things. I didn't think much of it at first. The apartment is old, creaky in some spots, and things move around in the walls, especially when it gets cold. But the noise didn't stop. It started small, like faint coughing or a muffled sound coming from somewhere above me. At first, I figured it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I'd be sitting on the couch in the living room, watching TV, and I'd hear it. It would come in small bursts, just faint enough that I think maybe I was imagining it. It was always the same, a dry, wheezy cough, like someone was trying to clear their throat. I thought it might be the neighbors at first, but the sound seemed to come from the ceiling. And then I remembered the attic. The apartment had one, though it wasn't used much. I think Ben had stored some old boxes up there, but I never really paid attention to it. I had a key to the attic, and I could access it through a small door in the hallway. It was just a dark, dusty space, filled with some old furniture and random stuff. I didn't really go up there unless I needed to get something from storage. The coughing noise seemed to be coming from somewhere in the ceiling, and that's when I started to feel weird. At first, I dismissed it. The old house creaked and groaned, and it could have just been a plumbing issue, or maybe the pipes were making odd noises. But after a few more days of hearing it, I started to get anxious. I began checking the attic every time I heard it, but when I opened the door, it was always just empty, dark, and full of dust. Nothing seemed out of place. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few days later, I went to bed one night, but I couldn't sleep. It was late, around 2 a.m., and I kept hearing the same faint coughing. It sounded close, closer than before. My heart started to race, and I tried to convince myself it was just the house settling, or the wind shifting through the walls. But it wasn't that. I knew that. I got up, grabbed my phone for light, and went to the attic door again. The door creaked open, and I climbed up the small ladder into the dark, musty space. I was half expecting to find nothing, just the usual dust and old boxes. But as I stood in the dark, I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the far corner of the attic, hidden behind a stack of boxes, was a sleeping bag. It looked out of place, and it made me pause. I took a few slow steps toward it, the faint coughing still echoing in my ears. My flashlight swept across the space, and I could see more. Food wrappers. Crumpled up, like someone had been eating up here. There were small pieces of bread, a few chips, and a couple of cans of soda scattered on the floor. It was like someone had been living up here, hiding out. I stepped forward and saw that the sleeping bag wasn't empty. I hesitated, but I couldn't stop myself. I slowly pulled back the corner of the bag, and my stomach dropped. Ben's jacket was inside. My first thought was to run out of the attic, but I didn't. I just stood there, frozen. What was going on? Why would Ben leave all of this here? I thought he had moved out. I thought he was gone. But it was clear now, he had never really left. My mind was racing, trying to process what I was seeing. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the sleeping bag, the wrappers, the jacket. I was in complete shock. I had no idea what to do. Part of me wanted to call the cops, but I didn't even know what to tell them. What if they didn't believe me? What if I was just overreacting? But the more I stood there, the more I realized that I wasn't imagining any of this. Ben had been living in the attic after he moved out. I didn't know why. I didn't know how long it had been going on. I walked back downstairs, my hands shaking as I tried to process everything. I felt like I was losing my mind. The coughing was still there, faint, almost like it was in the walls. I couldn't stop hearing it. I felt like I was being watched, like Ben was still here, even though I knew he wasn't supposed to be. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, pacing the house, my eyes glued to the attic door. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I knew I had to confront this head on. I called Ben, but he didn't answer. I left a voicemail, asking him to call me back as soon as possible. I didn't even know what I was going to say if he did call. I was too angry, too confused to think clearly. Hours later, Ben called me back. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Hey, man. What's up?" He sounded like his usual self, the guy I'd lived with for over a year. But I could hear something in his voice, something that made my skin crawl. I didn't waste any time. I asked him point blank, "Ben, were you living in my attic after you moved out?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, in the most casual tone, he said, "Yeah, man. I'm sorry about that. I didn't have anywhere else to go for a while, so I just kind of stayed there. Didn't want to bother you." I felt sick. I didn't know what to say. I asked him why he didn't just tell me, and he said he didn't want to cause any trouble. That was it. No apology, no explanation beyond that. Just a casual admission that he'd been living in my attic, eating my food, using my space without me knowing. I don't know why he thought it was okay. I don't know why he didn't just ask for help or tell me what was going on. But it felt like a betrayal. I had no idea what to do next. He said he'd come pick up his stuff, but I told him to stay away. I couldn't have him anywhere near the place anymore. The whole thing left me shaken. I didn't sleep for days, and I still get nervous whenever I hear a noise in the house. I ended up changing the locks, just to be safe. I still don't know why Ben felt the need to stay hidden in my attic, or how long it had been going on. All I know is that I can't look at that attic the same way anymore. And every time I hear something from above me, I wonder if it's really over, or if Ben is still somewhere, watching. It happened a few months ago, and I still can't shake it. I don't think I ever will. I had just moved into a new apartment. It wasn't much, kind of small, but cozy enough for me and my dog, Daisy. She's a good dog, a bit nervous around new people, but she's got this protective side to her. She'd always been wary of strangers, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I was getting settled in, unpacking boxes, arranging things around the apartment. The first week was pretty quiet. Daisy and I got into a routine. I'd go to work, come back, and she'd always be there waiting for me by the door. She seemed happy enough, but I started noticing something strange. Every time I'd leave the apartment, Daisy would be calm, but the moment I walked back in, she would always start growling, just low and steady, like she was waiting for something. At first, I thought maybe she just didn't like the sound of the key turning in the door or something. Dogs can be sensitive to noise, so I brushed it off. It didn't stop there, though. The growling started happening more often. Not when I came home, but in the middle of the day. I'd be sitting on the couch, watching TV or reading, and Daisy would start growling. Not at the door or window, but towards the hallway that led to my bedroom and the closet. I tried to ignore it, but it was becoming a little too consistent. Then came the night it all went wrong. It was a Wednesday, around 9 p.m. I had just finished a long day at work and was sitting down with a cup of tea, trying to relax. Daisy was next to me on the couch, lying down like she usually does. I was flipping through channels when she suddenly perked up. Her ears went straight up, and she stared down the hallway. Then she started growling, but this time it wasn't low or casual. It was more intense, like she was on alert. Her tail was stiff, and she didn't take her eyes off the hallway. I stood up and looked down the hallway, trying to see what she was reacting to. Nothing. The hallway was dark, and the bedroom door was closed, like always. I called her name softly, trying to get her attention. "Daisy, it's okay." But she just kept growling, the hair on the back of her neck standing up. I walked toward her, thinking maybe there was something outside, something she could hear that I couldn't. I checked the windows, made sure the blinds were closed tight. Everything seemed normal. But Daisy wasn't having it. She was fixated on that hallway. I thought maybe she'd heard a mouse or something. There was an old closet at the end of the hallway, a walk-in type, with old coats and storage boxes stacked in the corner. I figured it was a rat or some other critter that had gotten in somehow. "Daisy, come here," I called again, trying to snap her out of it, but she wouldn't move. Her growls grew louder. I felt uneasy, like something was off, but I didn't want to be one of those people who overreacts. I hesitated for a moment, but I figured I should check the closet. If there was a rodent in there, I could deal with it, right? So, I walked to the closet and stood in front of it, looking at Daisy. She was still staring at it, her growls now mixed with a soft whine. I slowly reached for the door handle, my heart pounding. I didn't know why, but I had this sick feeling in my stomach. Like I was about to find something I didn't want to find. I opened the closet door, and that's when everything changed. At first, I didn't see anything. The closet was filled with coats, old boxes, and some extra storage stuff. But as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I saw something that made my blood run cold. At the very back of the closet, behind a pile of coats, was a man crouched down, his knees drawn up to his chest, his eyes wide and panicked. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. There was this horrible knot in my stomach, and my entire body went cold. He wasn't just hiding. He was waiting. I could see a knife in his hand, clenched tightly, like he was ready to attack at any moment. I stared at him, and he stared back. His eyes were wide, and there was this desperate look on his face, like he knew he'd been caught but didn't know what to do next. Daisy was barking now, her growls turning into loud, angry barks. It snapped me out of my shock. I backed up slowly, heart racing. The man didn't move, just sat there, clutching the knife. His expression didn't change. He didn't speak. He just watched me. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at him, but I finally managed to turn around and run. I bolted toward the phone in the living room and called 911, my hand shaking so much I could barely dial. The operator answered quickly, and I could barely get the words out. I told her there was a man in my closet, and that he had a knife. I don't think I even made sense when I was speaking. I was so panicked, my mind spinning. The operator asked if I could leave the apartment, but I told her I couldn't. I couldn't risk him getting away. So, I stayed on the line, waiting, pacing back and forth, listening for any noise. The barking from Daisy didn't stop, and every time I heard something, I thought it was him moving closer. My heart was pounding in my chest. I must have stayed on the phone with the 911 operator for what felt like forever. It felt like it was taking an eternity for the police to arrive. I don't remember how long it took, but when they finally did, I was so relieved, I almost collapsed. They came in, guns drawn, and cleared the apartment quickly. When they reached the closet, the man was still there. They told me to step back as they arrested him. I could barely breathe, watching them handcuff him and drag him out. The man didn't struggle, didn't say anything. He was eerily calm. They asked me if I knew him, and I told them I didn't. I had no idea who he was or how he got in. The police said he'd been living in my closet for days, maybe longer. They found empty food wrappers, some old clothes, and personal items he'd been using to make himself comfortable. It was like he'd been hiding in plain sight, watching me without me knowing. They also told me that he'd been in and out of trouble with the law before, but nothing like this. They said it looked like he was just waiting for the right moment to do something, maybe attack me, maybe steal from me. They couldn't say for sure. The police took the man away, and I was left standing there, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. I still don't know how he got in, or how long he had been there. But what I do know is that I was lucky Daisy was there. If she hadn't been so alert, I might never have found him. I changed the locks that night. I haven't felt safe in my own home since. Every little noise makes me jump, and sometimes I can't help but glance at the closet, even though I know no one is hiding there anymore. But I'll never forget the way he looked at me, the way he didn't move or make a sound, just waiting. It's hard for me to even write this down. Honestly, I'm not sure if I'm making this sound worse than it actually was, but the thing is, I still can't shake the feeling that something isn't right, and I don't know how to explain it. I had a long day at work and came home later than usual. My place is pretty small, just a one-bedroom apartment, but I like it. I didn't have any plans that night, just planned on lounging around, watching some TV, maybe grabbing a snack, and going to bed early. It was one of those nights where you look forward to just shutting off your brain for a while. I remember I was on the couch, maybe around 9 or 10 p.m., watching something on Netflix. Nothing special, nothing to really grab my attention, just zoning out after the long day. I was tired. I know I was. Next thing I know, I wake up. It's pitch black outside, and I'm on the couch. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't even remember when I drifted off, but the TV was still on, and the living room was quiet. The first thing I noticed was how stiff my neck was. I probably fell asleep in an awkward position. I rubbed my eyes, tried to stretch a little, and that's when I noticed it. There was a plate of food sitting on the table in front of me. I stared at it for a moment, and then I realized I didn't make that. It was a half-eaten meal, chicken, mashed potatoes, some vegetables. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was a meal. A real one, not the kind of thing you just throw together when you're feeling lazy. It wasn't mine. I didn't cook that. Hell, I hadn't eaten anything at all since lunch, and I was planning to just grab a sandwich later. My stomach dropped. How could there be food there? How could there be food I didn't make? It was just sitting there, right on the table, with no explanation. I started feeling a little disoriented. My mind was racing, trying to figure out if I was dreaming, if I was still asleep. But I wasn't. I was wide awake. And the worst part? The front door was unlocked. I remember I had locked it when I got home. I always do. I don't know why that was the first thing that hit me, but it did. I walked over to the door, turned the handle, and sure enough, it opened. The lock was clearly undone. My mind raced. Someone had come in, right? But why? I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't make sense of any of it. I just kept thinking, maybe I was sleepwalking. Maybe I'm just really tired. But none of it added up. I went over to the window, pulled the curtain aside, and checked outside. There was nothing unusual, no sign that anyone had been lurking around. But the food, that's the thing I can't stop thinking about. Who put it there? I went back to the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. I sat down again and looked at the meal. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to. What if it was drugged or something? What if someone had been in here, watching me sleep? I couldn't stop thinking about that. The idea that someone had been in my apartment, possibly while I was unconscious, was unsettling. It didn't make any sense. I was alone, I thought. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was 2:15 a.m. How had it gotten so late? I hadn't set an alarm, and there was no way I just slept through hours like that. I had to figure this out. I had to. But every time I tried to think clearly, the only thing that came to mind was the food on the table and that door. I needed to know if someone had come in while I was asleep, and I needed to figure out what the hell happened. I went into the kitchen to check around, looking for anything that might help explain what was going on. Nothing was out of place, nothing had been touched, but the thought of someone moving around in my apartment while I was unconscious was too much to ignore. I opened a couple of cupboards, checked the refrigerator, just in case there was something strange like an empty container I didn't recognize. Nothing. It was just like I left it. Except for the food. The food I didn't make. I went back to the living room and started pacing. I felt like I was losing it. There had to be a reason for all of this, but I couldn't find it. I kept looking at the door, at the plate of food. I stood in front of the door for a while, just staring at it, my mind trying to put the pieces together. I decided I needed to check the locks. Maybe there was some kind of malfunction with the door, and that's why it had opened. I checked all of them: front door, bedroom window, the back door. Nothing was out of place. Everything was locked except for the front door. That was the one thing I couldn't stop thinking about. What if someone had come in and left without taking anything? Was it possible someone had been watching me? Had I been followed home? I couldn't stop the thoughts. Every minute felt like an hour, and nothing made sense. I walked back into the kitchen and turned off the stove, just in case. Then I went to the bathroom, checked the medicine cabinet, the shower, just in case someone was hiding. There was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The worst part is, I never found anything. No sign that anyone had broken in, no sign that anything had been disturbed. It was as though someone had come in, made the meal, and left without a trace. And yet, I knew something was wrong. It was like living in a bad dream. The meal, the door, the fact that I had no memory of falling asleep. I couldn't stop pacing, couldn't stop wondering if I was losing my mind. I wanted to go to the police. I thought about it. But what would I say? Hey, someone came in and made dinner, but nothing was stolen, and I have no idea who they were. I didn't want to sound crazy. I ended up locking the door again and checking the whole apartment one more time. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed up until the sun came up, too scared to close my eyes, too scared to think about what had happened while I was asleep. I kept the lights on and stayed by the door, listening for any sound. I never touched the food. I still haven't. Since then, I've made a habit of double-checking everything when I come home, locking all the doors, checking the windows, making sure nothing's out of place. I'm still not sure what happened that night. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. But something in me says it wasn't. Something tells me I wasn't just imagining the food or the unlocked door. Something tells me someone was in my apartment while I was asleep, and they left before I could catch them. And that thought, that feeling, has stuck with me every night since. It's hard to even talk about what happened. I've thought about it a lot since, and every time I do, I get a pit in my stomach. I never thought I'd be posting something like this, but I think I need to get it off my chest. This isn't the kind of thing you just forget. So, a few weeks ago, I decided to sell this old chair I had sitting in my living room. It was a decent chair, nothing special, but it didn't fit with the rest of my furniture anymore. I'd gotten a new one, and the old chair had just been taking up space. I figured I'd try selling it on one of those local buy-sell sites, thinking it would be an easy way to get rid of it. Honestly, I didn't expect much, just wanted it out of my house. I posted the chair online, took a couple of pictures, and wrote a short description. Not long after, I got a message from someone. His name was Brian. He said he was interested in buying it and asked if it was still available. I told him it was and that he could come pick it up. He seemed normal at first, polite and friendly. He asked if I was available later in the evening since he worked during the day. I wasn't thrilled about the idea of meeting someone after dark, but I didn't want to turn down a sale, so I agreed. We settled on a time around 8 p.m. He said he'd be there in about 20 minutes. I didn't think anything of it at the time, just figured he worked a late shift or something. I hadn't had many people respond to my ad, so I was just happy to get rid of the chair. Around 8:15, I heard a car pull up outside my house. It was dark, and I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, waiting for him to arrive. I peered out the window to see if it was him. The car was parked a little down the street, but I couldn't see the person clearly. I figured it was just him, so I got up to open the door. I was about to step outside when I got another message from Brian. He said, "Hey, I'm outside, but I can't park right in front of your house. Is it all right if I park further down the block and walk over?" That seemed odd to me, but I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe he didn't want to block someone's driveway or was being cautious. I told him it was fine. I didn't think anything was wrong at that point, but something about the situation started to feel off. A few minutes passed, and then I heard footsteps on my front porch. I peeked through the peephole in my door and saw a man standing there. He looked normal, nothing about him stood out as unusual. Just a guy in a jacket, standing in front of my door. He waved, and I opened the door. I was smiling, trying to be friendly, but he didn't smile back. "I'm Brian," he said, extending his hand. I shook it, still feeling uneasy but not sure why. I asked him if he wanted to come inside and take a look at the chair, but he said no. He looked down at the ground for a moment, almost like he was distracted. I led him to the yard where the chair was sitting on the porch. "Is this the chair?" he asked, looking at it. "Yeah, that's the one," I said, trying to sound casual. He nodded, looking it over, but then he said something that threw me off. "I need to check something. Is it okay if I go around back for a minute?" My stomach flipped. I tried to keep calm, but I asked, "What for?" "Just want to make sure it'll fit in my car," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. I should have just told him to leave right there, but for some reason, I didn't. I thought maybe I was just overthinking it. I told him the backyard was around the side and let him walk through the gate. He disappeared behind my house for a few seconds, and I could hear him walking around, checking things out. I stood at the front of the house, my mind racing a little. Something didn't feel right. It was like a little voice in the back of my head telling me to be cautious. But I ignored it. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something strange. A car parked farther down the block, right at the edge of my driveway. I hadn't seen it there before. It was a dark sedan. I squinted, trying to see if I could make out any details, but the headlights were off. There was no movement, and no one got out. I didn't recognize it, but I still didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just someone else coming to pick up a chair. A minute passed, then another. I felt a little more uncomfortable now. Brian was still in the back, and I could hear him moving around. I thought about calling him back, but before I could, I saw something strange. Two people suddenly got out of the car. I couldn't see them clearly, but I could tell they were moving towards my house. That's when it hit me. Brian had asked to go around back. Now, these two people were coming toward me, and the car was parked in a way that made it hard to see them from the street. My mind raced as I put the pieces together. I knew something was wrong. I should have trusted my gut. I started to back away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Just as I turned to step inside, Brian walked back around the corner. He was smiling, but this time it was different. It wasn't the same polite, friendly smile from earlier. It felt forced, like he was pretending to be normal. "Everything good?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, everything's fine," he said, his eyes shifting slightly toward the street. "Just needed to check something." I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I wasn't about to let him in. I wasn't about to let anyone in. "You know what, I've changed my mind," I said, my voice trembling slightly but trying to sound confident. "I think I'll just keep the chair." Brian's eyes flashed for a second, and the smile faded. He took a step forward, his posture stiff, but I stepped back, keeping my distance. He didn't say anything for a moment, then muttered something under his breath about checking with his friends. That's when I realized he wasn't alone. I turned and quickly shut the door, locking it as fast as I could. I heard footsteps on the porch, someone trying to open the door, but I didn't let it go. I dialed 911, my hands shaking, and kept my eyes on the door. Within minutes, the car drove off. Brian and the two others didn't try to force the door down, but I didn't take any chances. I stayed on the line with the operator until the police arrived. By the time they came, Brian and his friends were gone, and they couldn't find them. It felt like a close call. I've never been so scared in my life. After the police left, I went straight to the lock on the back gate and made sure it was secure. I didn't sleep much that night, and I never posted anything for sale online again. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't trusted my gut. I don't even know where to start with this. I've been trying to figure out a way to talk about what happened for days now, but every time I sit down to type, it feels like my thoughts get scrambled. I'm not good at writing or telling stories, but I need to get this out, so I'll just try to tell it the best I can. It started on a Saturday afternoon. My parents were away for the weekend. It wasn't the first time they'd left me home alone, but something about this time felt different. I can't say why, I just had a weird feeling that kept nagging at the back of my mind. I'd gotten used to being alone in the house by now, so I wasn't worried about it. I was just doing my usual thing, playing video games, watching TV, and enjoying the silence. The house felt too quiet, but I figured that was just because I wasn't used to being by myself for that long. Around 4 p.m., I decided to take a shower. I'd been inside all day, and I felt gross from sitting around. The bathroom is at the end of the hall, right by my parents' bedroom, and I remember thinking how nice it would be to just relax under the hot water for a while. I locked the bathroom door behind me, just like I always do, and turned on the shower. I'm sure I didn't hear anything out of the ordinary while I was in there. The water was running, the fan was on, and the steam quickly started fogging up the mirror. I don't know how long I was in there. I wasn't keeping track of time. But eventually, I turned off the water, stepped out, and grabbed a towel to dry off. I remember wiping the fog off the mirror with my hand, like I always do. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just leftover steam, maybe a smudge or something from when I wiped the mirror. But when I looked closer, I saw the word hello written in the fog. It wasn't there before, I swear. I would have noticed it if it was, but now it was clear as day, right in front of me, written in a clean, perfect script. I froze. It wasn't like I thought someone was playing a joke on me, but my heart started pounding. I felt my stomach turn, like I was suddenly hit with a wave of panic. My first instinct was to check the door, maybe I hadn't locked it properly, and someone had snuck in while I was showering. But no, the door was still locked. I checked it twice, and the rest of the house was still quiet. I stood there staring at the mirror for what felt like forever, trying to convince myself that I had just missed it earlier, that maybe it was there the whole time. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, it didn't make sense. I had been the only one in the house. No one else had been there. My skin felt hot and cold at the same time, and I could feel my heart racing. I didn't want to be alone anymore. I thought about calling my parents, but I knew they'd think I was being paranoid. I couldn't exactly explain what had happened without sounding insane. I didn't know what to do. I took a few slow steps back, and when I looked at the mirror again, I swear I saw the fog start to shift, like something was moving behind it. It didn't stay still. I wasn't imagining it. The edges of the letters seemed to blur for a second, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. That's when I grabbed my phone and texted my best friend. I didn't say much, just, something's wrong. I don't know what's going on, but I need you to come over. I didn't even know what I was asking her to do, but I didn't want to be in that house alone anymore. While I was waiting for her to text back, I stared at the fog on the mirror again. The word was still there, just hanging in the air like a bad omen. I couldn't stop thinking about how I had been alone in the house, and yet someone had written on the mirror. I couldn't explain it. It felt like the walls were closing in around me. A few minutes later, I heard the front door open and close. I jumped, thinking maybe my parents had come back early. But when I ran to the hallway and looked down, I saw my best friend standing at the bottom of the stairs. She was looking at me with a confused expression, like she wasn't sure what was going on. I hurried down the stairs and met her at the door. "What's going on?" she asked. I could barely say anything at first. I just pointed toward the bathroom, too shaken to speak clearly. She gave me a strange look but walked up the stairs with me anyway. When we reached the bathroom, she saw the mirror and immediately started laughing. I don't know why she laughed, but it was a nervous laugh, like she didn't know how to react either. She went to wipe the fog off, but I stopped her. "No, don't," I said. "It wasn't there before. I swear. It just appeared." She looked at me like I was crazy, but I could tell she wasn't entirely sure what to think. After a few seconds, she shrugged. "Maybe it's just leftover steam," she said. "I mean, you were just in there, right?" But it didn't feel like that to me. The way the word was written, the way it seemed to appear when no one else was around, it didn't feel normal. Something wasn't right. I wasn't crazy. I knew what I had seen. We both stared at the mirror for a few more seconds before I heard a knock at the front door. My heart stopped. I didn't know who it was, but I wasn't ready for anyone else to be in the house. My friend looked at me with a questioning expression, and I whispered, "Don't open it." I peeked through the peephole and saw a man standing there. He looked unfamiliar, just standing there, staring at the door, not even knocking anymore. His face was expressionless, like he wasn't expecting me to answer. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My friend must have sensed my panic because she grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the door. "Call your parents," she said, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to seem paranoid, even though everything felt wrong. I stood there for what felt like an eternity before my friend took my phone and called the police. I couldn't hear what she said, but I could tell from her face that she was just as freaked out as I was. I didn't know how long we waited for them to arrive. All I know is that the man never left. He just stood there in front of the door, staring. I never heard him knock again. Eventually, the police showed up and took over. By the time they arrived, the man was gone, but they checked the perimeter of the house, and there was no sign of him anywhere. There were no footprints in the snow, no car in sight. Nothing. It was like he had just disappeared. After they left, we checked the mirror again. The word hello was still there, but it was like it had faded just a little, like it had been erased, only slightly, over time. I don't know what that means. I don't know what any of it means. Since that night, nothing strange has happened. I haven't seen anyone outside the house or heard any noises. But sometimes, when I'm home alone, I still think about that word on the mirror. And I still wonder who wrote it. And why they did. I've never been able to shake the feeling that something is just waiting, lurking around the corner. I don't know where to start with this, but I feel like I have to get it out. I never thought something like this would happen to me, but here we are. The whole thing started about 2 months ago, and it hasn't stopped. It's hard to explain why I didn't think much of it at first, but looking back, I really should have taken it more seriously. It started with the knocking. I was in bed, just trying to get some sleep, when I heard it for the first time. 3 knocks. Not loud, but distinct, like someone was tapping on the door. It woke me up, but I didn't think anything of it. Sometimes people knock on doors at weird hours, especially if they're drunk or confused. I figured it was someone who had gotten the wrong house. I looked out the window, saw nothing, and went back to bed. But then it happened again. The next night, same thing. 3 knocks at exactly 2:33 a.m. I didn't get up to check. I didn't want to go outside at that hour, especially if it was just some idiot messing around. It was probably some late-night person with no real reason to knock. Maybe a drunk guy looking for a friend, I thought. So, I ignored it. The 3rd night, it happened again. 3 knocks at exactly the same time, 2:33 a.m. I remember I got up this time, just to look outside through the peephole. I didn't see anyone, but I also didn't feel like opening the door. I thought it was weird, sure, but at that point, I figured it was just some late-night prank. After all, what are the odds that someone would knock at the same time 3 nights in a row, right? But then it kept happening. Night after night. 3 knocks. 2:33 a.m., sharp. I started feeling more and more unsettled. It was like whoever was doing it knew exactly what they were doing. It wasn't random. They were knocking at the same time every night. I started to think it wasn't a coincidence anymore. Maybe it wasn't some drunk, maybe it was someone trying to mess with me, or worse, someone who was watching the house. It was then that I decided I needed to figure out who it was. I couldn't keep waking up every night at 2:33 a.m. wondering if someone was going to knock on my door again. It wasn't a normal thing, and I knew it wasn't a coincidence. So, I installed a security camera outside, just in case. The first night I had the camera up, I was a little anxious. I wasn't sure what I would find, but I wanted to know. I had a bad feeling in my gut, but I ignored it and went to bed, leaving the camera on. 2:33 a.m. came. Sure enough, the knocks came, just like every other night. 3 knocks, sharp and clear. I held my breath as I listened, waiting for something to happen. But when I checked the footage the next morning, what I saw made my blood run cold. The video showed the porch, like I expected. The first 2 knocks were just like usual, quiet and brief. But the third knock was different. In the footage, I saw a figure, wearing a ski mask, standing on my porch. He was completely still for a few moments, and then he knocked. 3 sharp raps on the door, like it was some sort of ritual. I felt my heart race as I watched the figure step back from the door and glance around. Then, in an instant, he sprinted off the porch. I couldn't see much of him, just the figure in the ski mask running fast, almost as if he were trying to make it back to wherever he came from before anyone saw him. I was frozen in place after watching that. My mind raced. What was he doing? Why was he knocking on my door at exactly the same time every night? It didn't make any sense. I knew this wasn't a prank anymore. Whoever this was, they knew exactly what they were doing. And worse, they knew when I was at home. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, watching the footage over and over, trying to figure out who this person was, why they were doing this, and if I was in danger. I didn't know what to do. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I even say? Hey, someone knocks on my door every night at 2:33 a.m., and I think they're wearing a ski mask? They'd probably think I was crazy. But the fact that the person kept coming back night after night had me convinced they were trying to scare me. And it was working. The next few nights, I decided I'd be ready. I didn't want to just sit there and wait for it to happen again. I set up another camera, this time inside, by the door. I also kept a bat near the door, just in case. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I wasn't taking any chances. The following night, I heard the familiar knocks. 3, sharp, right at 2:33 a.m. This time, I was ready. I watched the camera feed inside, waiting for something to happen. I saw the figure in the ski mask again. He knocked. And then, just like before, he turned and sprinted off the porch. But this time, I did something I hadn't done before. I opened the door. I wasn't expecting anyone to still be there, but I thought maybe I could catch a glimpse of whoever was doing this. Maybe I'd see something that would give me a clue. The night air was cold, and the porch light flickered. I looked around, but there was no one. The street was empty. The only thing I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stood there for a minute, just looking out into the dark. I didn't know what I was looking for, but my gut told me I had to do something. I had to act before this person came back again. The next morning, I reviewed the footage from the camera again, hoping I'd missed something. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. This time, after the figure sprinted off the porch, he didn't just run down the street. He ran into the shadows of the trees, like he was waiting for something. And then, something caught my attention in the distance, another figure. Two figures, standing just beyond the edge of the streetlight's reach. I couldn't believe it. There were two others, also wearing ski masks, just standing there, watching. I felt sick to my stomach. I didn't know how long they had been standing there, but they were definitely waiting for the right moment. This wasn't just a random guy knocking on my door. It was something far worse. I called the police that afternoon. I didn't care how it sounded anymore. I had the footage. I had proof. They couldn't ignore it. After a while, the police came by and took a report. They reviewed the footage, and one officer even made a comment about how strange it was that the person always ran off when they thought the coast was clear. I told them about the two other figures I'd seen. They said they'd keep an eye on things, but no one was ever caught. They couldn't find anyone in the area matching the description I gave. It's been a few weeks now, and the knocking stopped after I reported it. I haven't heard it once since. But I still think about those figures, and I can't shake the feeling that I was being watched all along. I don't feel safe in my own house anymore. I keep the cameras up, but I'm still wondering who those people were. Why they came, and why they never tried to take anything. Just knock. 3 knocks. Every night.